And no tariff jitters when it comes to the Indian rupee that strengthened against the US dollar. That is what we are hearing at this point in time. In fact, the rupee has opened 5 paise stronger at 87.68 against the US dollar. It closed at 87.73 a dollar on Wednesday. The Indian rupee that hovered at that record low levels at the risk of sentiment steepened as far as President Trump's threat was concerned, and that was yesterday. The rupee slipped to its record low and closed at 22 paise weaker at 87.88 against the US dollar on the 5th of August. And even as it witnessed a mild bounce in trade, the Indian rupee appreciated by 15 paise on Wednesday to reach 87.73 against the US dollar. But today we're seeing it has come up even stronger. Sakshi, my colleague, coming in to get us the latest on this. Sakshi, so we are seeing there have been no jitters when it comes to that, announcement that's been made by Donald Trump, and he continues to make those announcements from that additional 25% to secondary tariffs, and this could go up even further. We don't know what's going to really happen in the days ahead, but at least today, this morning, the Indian rupee is doing better.
Absolutely, a stronger opening for the Indian rupee. No tariff jitters there, very, very clearly. As far as the rupee opening is concerned, the rupee opening stronger at 87.68 to the dollar. Remember, the dollar has witnessed overnight decline as traders are betting on more and more Fed rate cuts than previously anticipated. And the Indian stock markets, remember, earlier have also shown resilience, really, to, of course, Donald Trump's tariff tantrums, as it were, and latest announcements coming in as well. So the Indian rupee clearly strengthening, even though oil prices are oscillating marginally. Remember, the key determinants really as far as the rupee are concerned are, of course, how the dollar index is performing and how oil prices are doing. And both at the moment are reflecting that the Indian rupee is resilient to the tariff announcements really coming in, and jitters really that, of course, Donald Trump's latest announcements were also attempted at doing.
Right. Thank you, Sakshi, for getting us the very latest. And let's just get you reactions coming about. And Rahul Gandhi, there a change of heart and a change of stand when it comes to how Donald Trump is threatening with those tariffs. In fact, he's gone on to say that this is an economic blackmail and an attempt to bully India into an unfair trade deal. Well, let's just come back to, when we talk about the Indian rupee that has strengthened against the dollar in the last 24 hours, even though those announcements that are coming about as far as Donald Trump is concerned. First, he went on to announce additional tariffs from 25% to another additional 25% to secondary tariffs. And of course, do remember that there is a 10% tariff that he has, threatened India because of the BRICS alliance. And that is, Donald Trump there making those bizarre headlines time and again. And there we have it. Of course, India there being impacted at the moment. And there is a 3-week window at that, but at the moment, as far as the Indian rupee is concerned, it is in fact a stronger this very morning. Alex, my colleague, joining us to get us the very latest on this. Alex, take us through between yesterday and today, how does the Indian rupee stand next to the dollar?
Well, Divya, hi, morning. I'm focused more on the equity markets and the way that they've opened today. And if anything, this is lending credence to the fact that the Indian market and India as a whole is perhaps calling Trump's bluff. Because if you think about it, let me lay a little bit of context for our viewers this morning. If you think about Russian sale of oil and its contribution to the global supplies, in 2024, it accounted for 1/10, that is about 10% of global supplies, and India bought about 13 to 18% of that. So it's very clear that Russia caters to a lot of other markets as well. So really, this is more than anything else a pressure tactic amidst this ongoing conversation about trade between the US and India, and also Trump's own negotiation between Russia and Ukraine, as you and your guests this morning have pointed out. But specifically on India markets, you have the benchmark Nifty 50 that's down only about 0.33%, only about 0.3%. That's practically unchanged in the context of this supposed large, big missile on trade that has been launched by Donald Trump. So more than anything else, I think my colleague earlier today used the term cocking a snook. It is the Indian equity investor that is not too troubled by this latest tariff announcement. Of course, the broader markets are seeing a little bit of a decline. So you have the small cap index that's down about 0.9%, close to 1% or so. And you have the mid cap index that's down about 0.5%. But the benchmark, that is the Nifty 50, which is an indicator of what the Indian equity market is doing, is pretty much Unchanged, largely unchanged, 1/3%. Now, if I look at the stocks where there is an impact, the stocks that you have to pay attention to are in the textile space, are in the gems and jewelry space, are in the shrimp exporting space, because these are all the sectors that export to the US at this point, and the impact is more specific to these companies than anything else. Of course, at the GDP level, at the economy level, the impact is expected to be only about 0.3 percentage points or thereabouts, even with these higher tariffs. So it's not going to be a very
standing
large
up to the bully
impact
there and
economically.
not
India's
right. Would you say this is India standing up to the bully and not buckling under pressure, at least for now?
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better at this juncture, because this is an announcement that has taken place overnight. He had threatened to do this, and he has given 3 weeks for there to be multiple things happening simultaneously. He is apparently going to be having conversations with Russia. India is going to be having conversations with China, because another angle that we're talking about here is that if the US is pushing tariffs at everybody, and the latest announcement is also a tariff on Japan, then you have other countries that will meet and that will do trade. So you have BRICS, where he's criticized the BRICS so many times, but you'll have more trade that is taking place between these countries, including China. By the way, Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Xi Jinping or going to China in the near future, that has probably raised Trump's hackles as well. So you could say that this is altogether threatening action by Trump, and India having a very measured response to all of this, calling it unfortunate and calling it not right, effectively.
Right, of course, this is something that was, happening since, of course, the war, before the war in Russia and Ukraine. And of course, that meeting that's coming up with Donald Trump and Putin, that's coming up as early as next week. Could that have any kind of impact, particularly when it comes not just to the markets, but also perhaps an end in sight? And that could really have an impact, a global impact when it comes to the markets at large.
That is one of the theories that is being propounded at this point, because frankly, it does not make any sense to levy this kind of tariff on India simply because it buys Russian oil. As one of your experts pointed out, it's something that has been pointed out by other people as well. The US themselves buys heavy metals from Russia. That goes into the production of nuclear energy for them. And you have other countries, including China, which is negotiating terms on a trade deal perhaps with the US, that buys a large amount of oil from Russia. The European Union buys a large amount of oil and gas from Russia, among other things. And so therefore, it's not about India's buying oil from Russia. It's likely trying to put additional pressure on Russia, saying, look, I'm going to threaten your major trading partner with additional tariffs. They could divert some of their oil, which, by the way, is very easy for India to do at this point. It's only about 18%, remember, of what Russia sells to the globe. And Saudi Arabia can very easily provide the amount of oil that currently is being bought by India from Russia. So it's not very hard from India's perspective to divert that purchase of oil. The question is about the principles, and India has repeatedly said that it will do what is necessary for its national security and for the well-being of its people, and that is to currently buy oil based on market-determined factors. And everybody knows that Russian oil is currently $2 cheaper than the market price. So why shouldn't India buy oil from Russia?
Right, something that India has been doing ever since COVID times. And of course, that is something, India, like you said, has a very measured approach, and, we don't take hasty decisions. And that is something that Donald Trump is known for. We've seen how things played out between him and Elon Musk. Where does this leave us as far as ties between the US and India is concerned?
Well, that is the primary question, and this is something that a lot of people are asking as well, because in the run-up to all of the tariff announcements that took place, the expectation was that India and the US had a certain amount of camaraderie. We were talking about the bonhomie between Trump and Modi, but that hasn't panned out, and that's left a lot of people a little confused, because, and there's one commentator that spoke to us not too long back, very large investment bank on the global stage, and what he said was that it's important for the US to keep India happy, because among or in the midst of everything that's happening globally, there's one country that you cannot ignore on trade, and that is the fastest growing economy in the world, and an economy that is already heading towards the top three in terms of size very, very quickly. So therefore, the expectation was that the US would tread lightly in its conversations with India. That hasn't happened. And this seems to be right from Trump's book of how to strike a deal. He's playing it hard, and he's negotiating very, very hard at this point. The point is that India has not blinked
are concerned
yet.
and the impact that this could have. We do have a 3-week notice by Donald Trump, and that a lot could change between now and then. A lot can change in the next 3 minutes when it comes to Donald Trump. But if this was to pan out, and just to break it down as far as the sector impact is concerned, if you could break it down for us sector by sector.
Yes, I can do that. In fact, some study has gone into this, Divya. So you have, and I'll read out from the list that I have on my screen. You have shrimps, where the US share in Indian exports is about 32%, and the total payable tariff now comes in at 50%. So you can understand that the prices are going to rise very substantially. Organic chemicals, the share of US exports in India's trade is about 13%. And so therefore, the total tariff goes up to 54%. There is carpets, where the tariff goes up quite significantly as well. And it's a very large amount of our carpets that are manufactured here that go to the US, more than 58% in fact. You have apparel, and India is a major textile player in the world, as you know. As much as 34.5% of Indian exports of textiles goes to the US, and that is where the most tariffs come through. It now will stand at 64% when those additional tariffs kick in. Woven apparel also is going to be taxed, or will have a tariff at 60.3%. You have diamonds, gold, and products, which is essentially gems and jewelry, where 40% of our exports go to the US, and you have a 52% tariff there. Machinery and mechanical appliances also, you have a certain amount of impact, and you have furniture, bedding, mattresses, and then you have a few other categories where you have steel, aluminium, copper, you have vehicles to a certain extent, and parts. That goes up, and the vehicles will have a 26% tariff now. Sona BLW, for example, a few auto ancillary companies, so basically companies that contribute to the companies that make the automotive vehicles, are going to get impacted. And finally, petroleum products to a certain extent, not very much, a 6.9% tariff. So broadly, the ones that I've mentioned before this, but do remember that it's not necessary for all of these companies to absorb the entire impact. In all probability, they will try and pass on a large portion of it, or as much as they possibly can. So it's going to be shared between the distributors in the US and ultimately the consumer in the United States. It's not a long-term sustainable measure that Trump has taken.